Right. Welcome everyone to VSET this week. We are very happy to have Ricardo Alonso, who is presenting competitive capture of public opinion, which is joined with Gerard, Padro-i-Miquel. We are very grateful to our two panelists, Suen and Jacopo Perego, who are going to ask questions. We don't have a co-author in the chat today, so if you have a pressing question, feel free to unmute yourselves, or if you prefer to write in the chat, I will read out the question for you. Next week, we have Alex Smolin with information design and smooth games, so come back and join us for that. All right, so Ricardo, the screen is yours.
Well, thank you, Julia, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to talk about this paper, and thank you, Wing and Jacopo, for willing to be panelists, and I look forward to your comments. So let me tell you about this paper that is joint work with Gerard. Now, this paper is about how interest groups, very broadly understood, which would include lobbyists, political parties, governments from different countries, compete to shape public opinion by influencing the sources of information that citizens consume in order to get a favorable coverage of issues of interest. Now, of course, the ultimate goal of this influence is to affect the policies enacted or other outcomes in the political process. Now, of course, the question of media capture or media influence has been amply studied in the context of a single entity. So most notably in the study of political capture of media by a government. Now, in this paper, we want to focus on situations in which there are competing groups trying to push public opinion in opposite ways. Now, I guess that everyone, given the topic, can come up with their favorite example of this type of interference in the source of information that citizens consume. But I'd like to provide some probably less well-known, or at least less salient examples. So there are a couple of papers I want to refer to. So the first one is this paper by Durante and co-authors that provide evidence that newspapers were more likely to have a bank-friendly coverage of the European debt crisis if their main financing through loans came from banks exposed to that debt crisis. So you can see how coverage was not neutral, was biased in a particular direction. So another example, So newspapers had a more muted coverage of car recalls when the manufacturers recalling those cars were also heavy advertisers in those newspapers. Okay, so these are two examples of interest groups shaping or influencing media. And these are examples of traditional media. Our paper is not only going to speak or try to model capture of traditional media, given that there has been a marked change in the sources that citizens get to be informed. So for instance, many citizens now resort to social media to learn about issues. And probably the issue of interference in this new media is more current than in traditional media. So we want to model. So our model, we want a model that can also be applied to new media as well as traditional media. Now, our ultimate goal is to understand competition between these interest groups to capture the media consumed by citizens. And we want to answer the following three questions. So what do news in a captured information source, in a captured media, look like? So what's the effect of media on the observables that the econometrician would be able to measure? The second question would be, well, how do rational citizens factor in the possible pressure that interest groups are exerting on media when reading this news? And finally, the more I/O question of competition between interest groups is, well, how does competition work? Okay, so how would interest groups distribute the pressure when there is a plurality of information sources? So, we're going to provide answers to these questions in the framework of the following model. So we're going to set up a general equilibrium model with a continuum of rational viewers with heterogeneous prior beliefs about an underlying binary state of the world. Now, citizens can become informed by consuming the coverage of one of multiple information sources, and two opposite interest groups trying to push different views on citizens are going to exert pressure, quote unquote, capture each of these sources. So I will be more specific later on, but basically the idea of capture is that if you capture a source, you can control whatever is printed by that source. Okay. Now we're going to impose two assumptions on this capture. The first one is that there's no commitment to the capture effort by interest groups. Actually, we're going to have these capture efforts being covert, non-observed by the citizens. And the second one is that the interest group capturing the media, the information source, cannot commit to a disclosure rule, cannot commit to an editorial policy on how to publish this, on what gets published. So this is not a model of Bayesian persuasion. It's actually going to be a model of cheat. So what do we find? Just as a preview of the results. So the first result is that capture media is going to have more polarized news. So actually, if the econometrician comes in, they will figure that the news that captured information sources are more informative. So there are more messages pushing very strongly or providing very strong evidence in one way or the other. However, rational citizens are going to discount these informative reports. So a capture feed is going to be met with viewer skepticism and is going to lead to less social learning because viewers are going to discard, in a way that I will be more explicit later on, they're going to discard these extreme messages. Possibly one of the main results in the paper that help us understand competition between interest groups is the fact that I will show that capture efforts are in some informational sense strategic substitutes. So basically, increasing the intensity of capture by the left in one media decreases the returns to capture to the right interest group and vice versa. And finally, we will put this into a media plurality setting, and we will show that these strategic substitutes feature will naturally lead to horizontal differentiation in media capture. And finally, in the final stage of the model, we're going to let citizens sort according to the value of information. So there's going to be a fraction of viewers or citizens that actually choose which media to watch on the basis of the value of information to them. And we will show, and this has already been reported in the literature, but we will show that in our model it is true that citizens sort ideologically. So right-leaning citizens consume right capture media. But we will see that there's going to be a feedback effect in such a way that increasing the number of citizens that sort according to instrumental value may actually reduce in equilibrium the amount of information provided by media. Okay, so that's the main results. Let me briefly place the paper in the literature. So I mentioned there's a large theoretical and empirical literature on media capture by the government, and there's a more limited, there's some literature about media capture by interest groups. Our model is one of competitive interest groups in a rich message environment. So we shy away from models with a binary signal or with a single interest group. And we're going to have heterogeneity on viewers' characteristics, in particular on the prior beliefs of the viewers. Now, in terms of the literature on media bias, there's this huge literature describing the sources, the factors that guide media bias. And they're basically, you can put them into two buckets. There's one, explaining media bias through supply side channels. And there's one, explaining media bias through demand side forces. Our paper is one of supply side media bias led by supply side forces that has some features of demand side media capture. Okay, so that's in terms of the related literature, taking into account that this is a theory talk. Let me get into what everyone is expecting, which is the model. So let me briefly tell you the features of the model, which I will then unpack in three parts. So there's going to be an underlying binary state of the world. The state of the world could be 1 or -1. So you can think of, your favorite ideological question. So 1 in this case, so the question could be, should I worry about global warming? 1 is yes. 1 should be no, you shouldn't worry about global warming. It's cyclical. It's not going to affect you. -1 would be, oh yeah, you should be worried about global warming. If you live in London in 10 years, you will be underwater. So this would be the two options. 1 pushing towards a more right-leaning narrative, -1 pushing towards more a left-leaning narrative. There's going to be a continuum of citizens with heterogeneous beliefs, and there's going to be the distribution of these beliefs, and there's going to be n information sources providing information about theta. There's going to be 2 interest groups interested in pushing an opposite coverage. So the left interest group wants the public to update towards state -1, wants them to believe that the state is actually -1, while the right interest group wants to push viewers towards state 1. Now, these interest groups are going to exert covert pressure on each source to capture its coverage. And even I'll be more specific later on, but basically capture the coverage means that they get to print the message, they get to print the news for that information source. And if they get to print the news, they can print any news. There's no limit. There are no constraints on what message a capture media, an interest group capturing the media can produce. And so on the basis of this simple model, I want to break it down into 3 parts. So first, I'm going to look at the case that there is a single information source with 2 interest groups trying to capture this information source. This is going to help us understand the basic communication equilibrium in this model. Then I'm going to move on to the second part in which I look at a case in which there is a plurality of information sources. However, viewers are locked into information sources in an exogenous fashion. Okay, so viewers do not sort across information sources, and that's going to help us understand the push towards horizontal differentiation in capture. And finally, in the third part, we're going to allow viewers to sort across information sources according to the value of information, in particular, according to the expected capture of each source. All right, so let me start, and I'm going to be more specific now about the details, the primitives of the model, with a case of a single information source. So an information source is characterized by an internal news report. So there's a report that is informative of the underlying state of the world, the report M, that is, it provides some information about theta, and that information is going to be encoded in this likelihood ratio of the likelihood of that message in the state 1 versus the likelihood in state -1. So basically, we can have a very rich message space for the internal report. But at the end of the day, what we care about is this likelihood ratio that for this talk, I'm going to call the informational content of the message. So the informational content of the message is going to be this lambda likelihood ratio. Now, each viewer is going to, because I have viewers with heterogeneous priors, each viewer is going to expect a different distribution of messages coming from this internal report, and is given by this distribution FH of lambda that depends on the prior of every view. So this is the informational this is the information that the internal news report generates. Of course, we are in a context in which messages have a commonly understood meaning. So if I see message M coming from the internal report, coming from an honest source, I'm going to say, well, that message means lambda. It's a lambda likelihood ratio of the state 1 versus state -1. And of course, every viewer observing that lambda will update using Bayes' rule to obtain a posterior belief. So viewers with different priors will arrive at different posteriors, but they will always agree on this on the commonly understood meaning of lambda. Now, of course, understanding lambda would be easy if if viewers knew they were observing the internal report. But what viewers observe depends on the identity of the sender. And I can have 3 types of senders. There's going to be an honest sender, and to simplify the models, we're going to have the honest sender being non-strategic and relaying the internal report to viewers. Actually, the communication equilibria that I will describe will still be equilibria if I allow honest senders to be strategic, although there we open the door to other equilibria. So having honest senders being non-strategic is going to allow me to have a essentially unique communication equilibrium. So the sender can be honest, could be left biased, meaning is captured by the left interest group, or could be right biased, captured by the right interest group. Now this, as I mentioned before,
can I ask a clarification question here? So here you say the sender. Do you mean a particular source? Because there are many sources there.
Remember that I'm looking at the monopoly case,
okay.
a single information source.
Okay, and obviously the assumption here is that the receiver will not be able to see ever the original source. It's always sort of through the intermediary.
So that's absolutely so that's an assumption that I will describe in the timing later on, but you're absolutely right. Okay. So a viewer observes the message M, but will not be able to observe the identity of the sender. So I don't know, is this coming from the honest reporting, or is this message being, actually just, some lie that the right or the left is trying me to, to believe. Okay, so the identity will be unknown to receivers. Now, these two.
Ricardo, can I just jump in very briefly? I think this is slightly confusing, and in the interest of
please.
Of clarity, my understanding from reading the paper, it's slightly confusing because you introduced this word sender that sounds as if there is a new player, which is not the special interest group. It's not a source. It's somebody else. But really, what you're trying to say is that the source is just like a machine that spits out news, and this machine can be captured. If it is captured by a left-wing special interest group, then it's going to be controlled by it. If it's not captured by anybody, it's honest in the sense that it just spits out whatever message was supposed to spit out. Is this the correct understanding of the model?
That is absolutely correct. That is absolutely correct. I mean, you can actually see this model. I mean, for those that are more computer science oriented, as a model of a man-in-the-middle attack. So let me remind you what a man-in-the-middle attack is. a sender, so the captain sends a message to be received by the lieutenant, and someone in the middle, an attacker, captures covertly the message and can switch it to something else. So that's the model. What we add to this model is the fact that there are competing attackers trying to capture that message. And these competing attackers have opposite preferences. Now, we thought that from a game theoretical perspective, it may be easier to say that there is a player called sender that could be one of three types, and the type determines the preferences. And if it is type left bias, it shares the preferences of the left interest group. But whatever, I hope that it is clear that this is very simple. Is the there's a printed message observed by viewers. That printed message can come up from the honest sender, can come up from the left bias, from the left interest group, or can come from the right interest group. That's it. Now, the preferences of the right interest group is, well, they're increasing in the posterior inducing in viewers, and when there's a plurality of viewers, we're just averaging this utility over beliefs across all viewers. And for the left biased sender, this utility on beliefs is decreasing. So basically, they have opposite preferences over the beliefs of the viewers. Now, the question then is, who gets to choose the message observed by the viewers? How is this determined? And this is going to be determined through a contest for control. A contest in which the right is exerting pressure, R, the left is exerting pressure, L. These two values determine the probability that the one who actually chooses the message is either the right interest group, the left interest group, or is actually coming from the honest, from the honest reporting, from the machine, as Jacopo was saying, that is just relaying the internal news report. Now, for the purpose of this talk, I'm just going to look at the linear contest model, in which if the right interest group exerts effort R, that's the probability that they win control. And if the left exerts effort L, that's again the probability that they gain control. So that, the probability that the feed remains honest is 1 minus R minus L.
How come R plus L is less than 1 if they are chosen independently?
So I get this question in every theory talk.
Sorry.
We adjust that by saying, So R belongs to some space X sub R, L belongs to some space X sub L, and we're gonna make our life simple, as for reasons that you will see later on, and we're gonna assume that the maximum of XR plus the maximum of XL is less than 1.
Ricardo, can I ask a question as well?
Oh, please.
I suppose I'm reading ahead to the cost functions that you have. So these are independent of the underlying true state, or even independent of the message that the source got. So
yes,
obviously, I would think that claiming that climate change is not really happening when, I don't know, there's 16 hurricanes in consecutive weeks might end up being difficult to argue, or something like that, right? So do you generalize this, or
no? Okay, so that's, I think that's a great point. So
yeah.
So Francesco, let me you tell me if I'm reading your question correctly. Somehow you're saying, listen, either the incentives of the interest groups to capture the information source may depend on what the information source is actually going to publish, or may depend on what the actual state of the world is. Because if I know that the state of the world is favorable to me, and or I think that the information source is going to all generically publish news that are favorable to me, I'm going to have less incentives to capture. So we're not going to extend the model in that way. And the reason is the following. We actually know or have a hint of what the communication equilibrium in that case will look like. But one of the, but again, remember, I need to put this into, so I'm not only worried about the communication equilibrium, I need to put this into a game of competition in which first we need to compete over sources, and then I'm allowing viewers to sort endogenously. Now, one of the reasons for why I'm going to be able to tell you something about all this is because, as you will see, communication equilibria is very simple. Had it not been this simple, I don't think we can say anything about really, what can we say about full competition across the plurality of media.
Very honest answer, thank you.
For me?
Very honest answer, thank you.
I mean, again, it is what it is. But I mean, you will let me show you what equilibrium looks like, and then we can maybe pick up that question again to see what your assumptions would add to that case. Okay, so we have typical Inada conditions for the cost function, and that's it. So there's going to be pressure by both left and right trying to influence, to capture the source. So going back to the timing, so simultaneously, both interest groups select the capture efforts on this single information source. Then nature decides who wins, H, R, or L, according to these efforts R and L. If the source is captured, the interest group decides which message to publish. If it is honest, the source simply conveys the message, the internal report. Citizens observe the message M, the published message M, but do not observe neither the capture efforts nor the identity of the sender, of who is choosing the message. The update beliefs payoffs are realized, and we're looking for perfect Bayesian equilibrium of this game. So with this timing, let me jump in to describing communication equilibria. So this is the proposition, but I will unpack this proposition in 5 slides. So it's not, it's not to be digested in one go. So fix 2 levels of fixed R and fixed L for now. So suppose that these are known by the viewers, and let tau star R and tau star L be the mixed strategies of the right interest group and the left interest group. Now, given R and L, there are unique upper threshold and lower threshold, lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar, such that for every communication equilibrium, the first bullet point describes the support of the mixed strategies of the interest groups, and I will describe them in more detail. The second bullet point describes how news are interpreted by viewers, and the third bullet point describes how these 2 thresholds are determined. So let me go to the first bullet point. So the first bullet point is, what is the support of the messages? Let's call them lies. The support of the lies of the interest groups. So the right interest group is only going to send messages that are at or above lambda upper bar, so that half an informational content is sent by the honest sender at lambda upper bar or above. So they lie by sending these extreme right-leaning messages. What about the left? The left is only going to send messages whose informational content is below lambda lower bar. So you see in this graph on the right, the support of the right is above lambda upper bar. The support on the left is below lambda lower bar. Now, if you're asking, well, what does the distribution look like of this mixed strategy? Well, we need some more assumptions to pin down something about these distributions. So in particular, if the probability of high messages when the state is -1 is non-increasing in the message, then we can say that these lies are, these PDFs are monotonic, meaning that the right is more likely to send messages that are more extreme, and the left is also more likely to send messages that are more extreme in the opposite direction. Okay, but so this is the result of this. So these are the supports of the mixed strategies of the interest groups. When we put them together, we observe the distribution of the messages. So let me, make this slightly bigger. So this is the distribution of the messages. This is, again, what the econometrician would observe when studying, when running their machine learning algorithms on this news. What I have in the dotted line would be the distribution of news if the source is always honest. And on a solid line is the distribution of news with capture. So the econometrician will actually see that news, in a sense, is more informative because there's more incidence of more strong evidence in one way or another. Okay, so basically reports become more polarized to more conclusive reports. However, of course, there's a question.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, is this always a continuous density, or do you need to make an extra assumption?
For the continuity of the PDF?
Yeah.
So hold on a second. I know that it is 0 at lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar.
Okay.
And as long as the underlying PDF is continuous for the internal report, it is continuous.
Yeah, I guess my question was, is it 0 at lambda lower bar and
It
lambda
is.
upper bar?
It
Okay.
is.
Thank you.
I mean, the reason is that a viewer observing lambda upper bar is going to update to lambda upper bar. So if you had a positive PDF there, they would be updating to something that is less than lambda upper bar.
Yeah.
So that's the reason basically for why you get that it is.
Thank you.
Loosely speaking. All right. So this is the support of the news. This is what the econometrician observes. Now, what is the learning? So what is the interpretation of this news by viewers? Well, viewers that are rational, I'm going to be skeptical of these extreme messages. So any message above lambda upper bar, they're going to say, I don't know. Is this really true that the state is really 1, or is it coming from the right interest group? So they're going to, see those messages as tainted. And all of them, any message above, they're going to update as if the informational content would be lambda upper bar, the maximum, this threshold on the informational content. And the reason for why they all update to the same lambda upper bar is simple. Suppose that 2 messages have a different likelihood ratio, a different informational content. Even though viewers have different priors, in this binary state model, if one message has a higher informational content, their posterior belief will be higher relative to the other message for any prior P. Therefore, if 2 messages have a different informational content, they're going to generate different expected utility for each of the interest groups. So the only way that the interest groups are indifferent between the messages they use is that they all have the same informational content in equilibrium, the same likelihood ratio. So that's why all the likelihood ratios above lambda upper bar are equalized and equal to lambda upper bar, and likewise for every message below lambda lower bar. So what we get is this censorship of extreme messages, which of course is very bad for learning, because precisely those messages that would be more informative and that would move viewers more strongly one way or another are jammed through capture by these interest groups. So you can have, you know, models of influence, and then learning is impaired because of concealment, obfuscation, etc., or lower incentives to provide quality. Here, learning is impeded, is hindered, because those messages that would speed up learning the most are those that are precisely jammed by the interest groups. Okay, so that's in terms of how viewers, skeptical, you know, rational viewers interpret the news. Now, how are these two thresholds determined? And I want to spend some time here because it's going to be important to explain the resultant strategic substitutes. Now, this is a model of lying, but it's not a model of deception, right? So even though interest groups are lying, viewers are seeing through this and are not systematically deceived. So the condition to pin down these two thresholds is that the posterior beliefs of each viewer must average in expectation to the prior. And this is the condition that I have here, taking into account the likelihood of each of the different sources and how these sources are going to be interpreted. We need this average to be equal to the prior of the viewer. So now focusing, let's say, only on the on lambda upper bar, you know, how viewers interpret the lies coming from the right, we have this condition pinning down lambda upper bar. So basically, let me interpret it. On the right-hand side of this inequality, what you have is the upward drift, systematic drift, when the right controls the message. So when the right controls the message, if viewers knew the identity, viewers would see that as a completely uninformative sender and would remain at prior P. They don't know the identity of the sender, and they update to lambda upper bar. So there's beliefs are moving upwards. This upward drift must be canceled by the fact that there's a downward drift when is the coverage is that when the news are produced by the honest sender. So, and that's what you have on the left-hand side. So on the left-hand side, the honest sender sends extreme reports. Those extreme reports are downgraded to lambda upper. So in a sense, one interesting thing about this model is that fear of capture by the right interest group makes the honest coverage left biased in equilibrium. So in particular, what I mean is that increasing the capture, increasing the capture of the right interest group will actually make the coverage of the honest sender more left-leaning. All right, I'll tell you how that matters when I look at whether.
Sorry, Ricardo. I actually, so just again, in the interest of clarity, I maybe it's just me, but I'm not sure I understood this last point. So maybe if you could explain it a little bit more, that would be fantastic. I thought in my mind, if this is useful to explain my confusion, that if I'm a voter, if I see a message that is above the threshold, I'm gonna discount it,
yes.
as you described. But if I see a message that is in between these two thresholds,
Yes.
I'm gonna be like, that's not a message coming from an interest group, and therefore I will not bias the interpretation of that message in one way or the other.
Very good. So if I may interrupt 1 second.
Yeah.
That's absolutely correct. But remember that the honest sender is also sending messages above lambda upper bar and below lambda lower bar. So it's not only that so you're right that any message between lambda lower bar and lambda upper bar is going to be fully trusted, not discounted.
I see. I understand. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay, so the problem is precisely, so this is what I like about, I mean, it's a simple model, but this is what I like about it, is that precisely those messages coming from an honest source. So let me be a little graphic, maybe too graphic. So imagine one is Trump can cure cancer, and -1 is Trump can actually cause cancer. So these are the two views. So an honest sender saying, you know, actually we found evidence that Trump can cure cancer will be discounted. And this is what I mean, that increasing pressure from the right is actually going to discount more the messages in favor of the right. And as a result, it's going to shift. If these messages are only coming from an honest report, it on average are going to look more left-leaning. That's what I meant.
I have another question. Clarify.
Yes,
earlier on, you had this objective function of the interest group is V of, I want to push the beliefs of the viewers up. But your conclusion, this determination of the lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar, they don't depend on what this V function looks like whatsoever. So
well, as I will describe in a second, this lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar do not depend on the shape of V, but they also don't depend on the distribution of viewers. So let me address those 2 points at the same time. What is the equilibrium condition? The equilibrium condition is that any message sent by, because these utilities are strictly increasing or strictly decreasing, any message sent by the right must induce the same likelihood ratio on viewers. Now, to induce that's a property that does not depend on the slope of V. It only depends on the informativeness of the internal news report. It also doesn't depend on the distribution of the priors. It only depends on the distribution of the news. So that's why these two thresholds, lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar, do not depend neither on the distribution of viewers' priors, nor on the specific shape of the utility of the interest groups. Now, this is a property that is coming simply from equating payoffs under mixed strategies, but it's going to prove very useful, because when I look at competition across competition to capture different outlets and viewer sorting, communication equilibrium is going to be pinned down only by the efforts they put, not by and that's it. So knowing the efforts they put, I know the two thresholds, lambda upper bar and lambda lower. So some comparative statistics on informativeness of these two thresholds, increasing capture by either the right or the left leads to lowering lambda upper bar and increasing lambda lower bar. In other words, more capture unambiguously leads to a Blackwell less informative source. I just mentioned that these thresholds are invariant with the distribution of prior beliefs of the viewers. And the second one is that if the underlying internal news report is Blackwell more informative, this is going to push lambda upper bar up. So these are lies that are more favorable to the right, and lambda lower bar down, these are lies that are more favorable to the left. Okay. So these are some comparative statistics on the informativeness of the communication equilibrium. So now I'm going to describe the equilibrium, and I don't think I have. How am I doing on time?
Well, you have 15 minutes officially, but you can take a bit more.
Okay. So yes, because I have this slide. All right. So I think I'll move it on a little bit. Okay. So now I want to describe the equilibrium, and to understand the equilibrium, we need to understand the marginal benefit of capture. Now, remember, if I am the right, increasing my effort R, what that is doing is increasing the probability that I am the one controlling, that I am the one choosing the messages. It is decreasing the probability that it is coming from an honest source. So I am crowding out the honest source in favor of, my implanting in viewers this message lambda upper bar. So that's going to be my return. And that's the expression that I have here. Graphically, I am replacing the distribution on viewers, on how viewers interpret the news with, interpreting the news as lambda upper bar. And that's going to just give me the equilibrium. I will describe very briefly the equilibrium capture for this monopoly information source. So there's always a pure strategy equilibrium level of capture. And in every such equilibrium with R star and L star, the equilibrium levels of capture, there are unique lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar satisfying these four conditions. So the first two conditions are the conditions that, given how viewers interpret the news, anticipating R star and L star, it is optimum for the interest groups to covertly exert that much effort. And the second and the last two equations are the equations determining lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar, given the fact that viewers anticipate R star and L star being the efforts. Yeah, there's a question.
Yeah, just for clarification. So are R star and L star unique?
No. So there is a poor strategy equilibrium level of capture. And I can have many different equilibria R star, L star. I'm not, I'm not saying that those are unique. But if you pin down an R star and L star, there's a unique threshold lambda upper bar and lambda lower bar. Okay. Is that?
Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Yes. So let me now explain, what's the nature of competition between the interest groups. So I just described that this is the marginal benefit to the right interest group from marginally increasing the effort they put. Okay, so they get to replace the honest reporting with lambda upper bar. How does this marginal benefit change if we increase the anticipated level of effort, level of capture by the left? Well, there's going to be basically two effects. So the first one is that now with the left, with a more expecting more left capture, viewers are going to be more skeptical of messages favoring the left. But that's good for the right. Okay, so in a sense, what I described, that now the honest reporting is becoming more right bias. And on top of that, viewers are also more skeptical of favorable messages to the right, because they say, well, with more left capture, there's less likelihood that the reporting is honest. And if there's less likelihood that the reporting is honest when compared to the right, then I'm not going to believe as many of the right-leaning messages as I did before. So these two forces work in the same direction and give you that capturing efforts are strategic substitutes. That increasing, in summary, increasing the capture effort by the left makes, through the interpretation in equilibrium of viewers, makes the right less likely or less willing to capture, because the interpretation coming from the honest reporting is more right-leaning overall, basically. Now, this is an important insight. So we spend some time to clarify, what is the extent in which this is true. So for instance, the question, what happens if there are naive viewers? So we have in the paper a long discussion characterizing equilibrium when a fraction of the viewers are naive, meaning they take the message at face value, that's going to change the communication equilibria, and actually sophisticated viewers are going to update in a different way. But in any case, it is still true in that setting with naive viewers that capturing efforts are strategic substitutes. Okay, so this is important in understanding the nature of competition, the I/O aspect of this paper. So let me actually expand it a little bit. And instead of the linear case, suppose that I have that the probabilities, the winning probabilities in this contest are satisfied two conditions. So the first one is that capture by a sender does not improve the odds of the message being generated by an honest source versus the other sender. So basically, that assumption is tantamount to saying that capture by one sender is crowding out primarily the honest reporting rather than crowding out the other sender. And the second one is that we're not going to introduce any cross-partial, any interaction effects coming only from the winning this contest winning probability. So with these two conditions, it is still true that we have a game in strategic substitutes with these more general contest functions. Yes,
Ricardo, yeah, but is this a reasonable assumption? Because, you know,
which one?
if the last one that you mentioned, the one that basically putting more effort basically increases the probability of stealing quota, okay, from the honest reporter, because was that the assumption? No, sorry, that you increase the probability of stealing from who? Sorry, I missed that.
Okay, so imagine I'm the right, and I'm increasing my capturing effort. What I am reducing is, I'm reducing the probability of both the left winning and the honest winning, but I'm reducing the probability of the honest winning more. So okay, I'm crowding out, I'm reducing more the honest rather than the other guy.
Okay, that makes sense. Sorry, I misunderstood you. I understood you.
So basically, I mean, so basically this assumption, another way of seeing this assumption, although it's a little loose, is to say that increasing capture increases total capture, increases the total probability that the message is not coming from the honest on the honest side. Although it's not precise, but that's the spirit, is that more capture is reducing honest reporting, and that gives us one nice result, which is increasing capture by either interest group actually reduces the Blackwell informativeness of the source, which would not be true if this assumption were not true. All right. I don't think I'm going to have time so basically this is a slide just introducing a notation to say, listen, we want to understand how do incentives to capture change with changes in the distribution of priors of the audience. And we're going to say that a group wants to fire up the base when their incentives to capture increase when they're faced with a more like-minded audience. So basically, the right wants to fire up the base if their incentives to capture grow when there's a first-order stochastic increase in the distribution of priors of the audience. And the opposite would be they want to moderate the opposition. So we're going to have results later on precisely about what happens when interest groups want to fire up the base. Okay, so now that we understand the basic monopoly information source, let's move on to multiple information sources. So we're going to have n information sources. Each interest group wants to, has to decide how much capture effort puts in each one of these sources. We have cost of pressure being perfect substitutes across all these capture efforts, but that's not essential for the analysis. And we are looking at a case in which citizens single home on one source. So basically, which outlet viewers watch is exogenously given in this section. Okay. Now, if you're worried about the single home, we have expanded this model to multi-homing, and we actually can solve this model for multi-homing, but I don't have full results for you just yet. But the key aspect of characterizing communication equilibria in a world with multi-homing and interest groups capturing more than one outlet, we have a characterization. All right, so I mean, our goal is to understand, well, how do shocks in the industry change the distribution of capture? And basically, the underlying idea is that strategic substitutes is just going to exacerbate any horizontal differences across sources. So any change in a source that favors one interest group versus the other is just going to expand to the whole media landscape. So we have results in this sense, and I don't think I'm going to have time to discuss this slide in all detail, but I just want to give you the gist of it. So we introduce a measure of differentiation, or call it polarization, which is basically how different are the capture distributions across media, and we focus on the case of duopoly. So imagine, I'm going to tell this proposition in words. Imagine that there's a change in one media that favors the dominant interest group, meaning the interest group that primarily controls that media. Then what we're going to have is an increase in media differentiation across the whole industry. So the whole industry, so media is going to, the right-leaning media is going to look more right-leaning, left-leaning media is going to look more left-leaning. So this is basically one of the results that we have. We have something about saying that, so my evidence of this is that Jeff Bezos did not buy Fox News, but went to Washington Post. But let me skip that for the discussion.
I'm sorry, Ricardo. I'm very meaningful on how little time left.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify something. So, what is exactly that the voters do in terms of choosing the media outlet? Are they strategic?
All right. Sorry. So remember, remember that at this stage in this section of the talk, viewers are fixed to outlets.
So they're just partitioning each outlet as a fixed measure of viewers or something like that. Okay.
So what I want to understand in this setting is competition for capture that is only coming from supply side effects. And I do that by fixing the viewers to audiences. Later in the next part, I will introduce viewer sorting, and I will introduce demand side effects and put them both together. So this is simply to say, strategic substitutes leads to horizontal differentiation in media in a natural way. So let's go back. Which I have how much time?
Well, feel free to take a couple of minutes. Officially it's 2, but finish
2 minutes. All right. So
no, but you can take that as non-binding.
All right. So it's a soft 2 minutes. Thank you. So let's talk about endogenizing the viewer's choice of media, and what we're going to have is the same setup as before, with N media, interest groups deciding how to distribute capture across all these media, and then viewers are partitioned into two types of viewers. There are viewers that only sort according to entertainment value. So basically they're fixed. So these are fixed to different sources. And then a fraction raw of all viewers sort on instrumental value. So they're going to go to the source that has the higher value, the highest value of information, that provides the most value to them. Okay. So, and we want to understand, and to do this, we endow each viewer with a decision problem for which they need information. Okay, so basically, at the end of the day, they have to decide between act or not act. Those with a prior, with a high prior, will need strong evidence against theta equals to 1. So they need messages that are with a very low lambda to change their decision. And likewise, those viewers with a low prior that are more likely not to act, they need a strong evidence that of a high lambda, so that theta is really 1, for them to change the decision. And that's going to drive the value of information. How do viewers sort? Viewers sort endogenously according to their prior, as you would expect, and has been reported already in very nice papers in the literature. So viewers sort largely ideologically, meaning right-wing viewers, as I said, need a credible low message to change action. There's no point in watching media that is controlled by the left, because that limits the amount of evidence useful to change their decision. And likewise, for left-wing viewers, they find little value in watching right-captured media. So you're going to have, in general, this sorting according to the ideology. Now, how does this viewer sorting match with capturing efforts being strategic substitutes? Well, remember that from the perspective of the interest groups, there's a push towards horizontal differentiation. So there's a push to controlling different media. Viewer sorting is going to play to that. Another question is, how do interest groups react to viewers that are more like-minded, in a sense? So if interest groups want to fire up the base, there is this positive feedback in the sense that, distributing capture, differentiating capture is going to differentiate audiences in a way that leads to higher capture by each interest group in their particular media, reinforcing this sorting of viewers. If interest groups want to fire up the base. If interest groups want to demobilize the opposition, you have the opposite effect, that actually, you don't get this equilibrium in which, with very polarized media, very differentiated and polarized media. So one point that I want to make is that in this model, you can get a media landscape that is characterized by very polarized coverage with very segmented audiences. You can even call it, echo chambers, everyone just feeding on their own, in a model with fully rational audiences sorting according to instrumental value. That's a result in this model. I have an example showing that this result can actually result in less information being provided, but I don't think, I've pushed the attention of viewers a little bit too much already. So I'm going to skip this. You can read it in the paper. I'm going to skip this, and I'm going to jump to wrap up the main points of the paper. So again, we want to understand competitive capture by two interest groups of public opinion, and they do it by interfering, by trying to capture the information sources on which viewers get their information. Now, what capture does is it leads to polarized news, but viewer skepticism leads to limited learning. What we find is that competitive capture naturally leads to horizontal differentiation in capture coming from these strategic substitutes, and that citizen sorting can actually exacerbate this differentiation if interest groups are interested in firing up the base. So they're more likely to exert effort into more like-minded media. So let me just very briefly step aside and say that, as an information economist, the last 7 years or 8 years have been really worrying, right? So we've been reading about the death of truth. We've been reading about how viewers, believe everything they read, and that's worrisome. They're gullible, blah, blah, blah. And advances in AI are going to make everything, so are we going to be able to trust the things we observe? And then writing this paper, I thought, okay, well, Ricardo, here you have an answer that they're not going to believe everything they see, right? So rational viewers are going to possibly see through this and not be completely fooled by these messages. Of course, that's the bright side, right? Because the dark side is that, yes, but we're not going to learn anything because of a general distrust of this media. So, how to make media more trustworthy, I'll leave it for future research and probably those of you as well as the panelists. And with this, with this note, I'd like to finish and thank you.
Thank you very much. So now, we had a couple of audience questions already in the chat, but maybe let me first ask the panelists if they want to make any last comment or ask any other question. I don't know, between Wing and Jacopo, who one of you wants to start?
I noticed a question on the audience, which I thought quite kind of interesting too. So should we invite the audience to Constance? There's a question from Constantine Sorokin.
Okay, I can do so. My idea builds on the old mechanism design intuition that if someone deviates, right, you only trust the deviation if it's against their interest. Right, so for example, imagine that some extreme, say, right-wing media outlet says, okay, situation is very bad, it's time to increase taxes.
Okay.
Then perhaps you can trust them because kind of they're reporting against their interest.
Oh, no. Okay.
I understand that this is not something that's happening in this model, right? And my intuition is that, okay, here media feels no pressure, right? Kind of.
Let me clarify that, because I think that the way I describe it, it means like that all media are to some extent captured by both sides. So let's take Fox News. And now the question is, what do you think Fox News is? Do you think Fox News is equally captured by the right and the left?
No.
No, it's primarily captured by the right. And now the question is, how much is it captured by the left? And if you say, are you kidding me, Ricardo? Fox News is not captured by the left. Anytime in this model, anytime you see in Fox News, Biden is doing a great job, you're going to say, this must be true. And that's consistent with this model. So the only way to argue that you're going to suspect a message favoring Biden on Fox News is if you think that Fox News is captured by the left.
No, I understand kind of my intuition was that maybe kind of in a slightly different modification of the model with slightly different assumptions, they'll have to make these messages from time to time, perhaps to external pressure, or perhaps to win the trust of the audience, or like something like that.
Okay, so that's I think that's a great point, and that's a point of differentiation of this paper with the previous paper. In previous papers looking at ideologically biased owners or ideologically biased journalists, news. So papers by, for instance, Jacopo's paper in which, or Wing also has papers in which, competing, so a media, a demand side explanation in which to compete, to attract viewers, I want to consciously bias my coverage in one way or another. Here, the outlets, the information sources are passive recipients of capture, right? So it's not like the information sources are saying, I want to purposefully shift my internal report one way or another. They get the internal report, they want to publish it, and it is only the capture of these interest groups that shapes bias. Now, I guess if another way of reading your point is to say, well, but maybe the interest group want their message to be credible, or to build a reputation. So maybe from time to time, I want, as an interest group, to say, I've captured the message, the feed. I don't want to push always in the same direction. I want to push it in the other direction. That's a great point, but that's something that we don't cover. The incentives to build the reputation.
Yeah, thanks.
So I have a slightly different take on a similar question. Like say I'm a Trump hater.
Okay. Trump causes cancer.
I want to plant a story which says that Trump can cure cancer just to make to cause confusion on the side of readers, to make the opponents look ridiculous. So this is a general idea about kind of a lot of these fake news and stuff is not really to change opinion, but to make people skeptical about everything else. So it's not in your model because things are there's no uncertainty about the effort or the types of. I mean, people know the types for sure. They don't know which type is doing the control. But I suppose in some other context, this kind of sowing confusion could arise in equilibrium.
I completely agree. I mean, that's a fascinating question, and actually, Gerard and I have been talking about. So I mean, so if I understand that point, so in this model, you only as an interest group, you only have one way of convincing viewers, which is pushing your agenda. So, the right interest group, the only way they can to persuade viewers is by sending high messages. Another possible way, which is not in this model, is I have two options. One is to provide strong evidence in favor of my cause, or another one is to discredit your cause. So I could go positive on my side, or I could go negative on your side. And somehow the reading of the literature is that interference or capture primarily favors going negative, saying, oh, but you're so wrong, you're so full of it, blah 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 blah, as opposed to providing positive evidence in your favor. And admittedly, this is, I'm not going to push the boundaries. This is not in our model. I mean, let me ask you, I don't know if it is in any model, this idea that you can persuade into, you have a choice of two different, of going positive or going negative. But off the top of my head,
there's some work about kind of positive campaigning versus negative campaigning. But
yeah, I think I've seen, show wrap,
Maybe before we run out of official time, I wanted to ask Jacopo if he had anything.
Yes, thanks. So just like, just a few comments / questions. I unfortunately have to go in 7 minutes. So so first of all, very nice paper. I think this is a very interesting model, and I really like the question. I think the question is very ambitious and important. It seems to me that it is key, as I was reading the paper and also during the presentation, it's key to explain why substitutability does not depend on the linearity of the contest function. The linearity, as you said, can be slightly weakened. I think it's key to make that argument. One possible way to like, in a constructive sense, one way I think it could be useful for me at least to understand really what drives the substitutability is to come up with an example of a contest function that actually leads to complementarity. I think that would help me understand what are the mechanics of the model that lead to substitutability, just to provide an example of the opposite. But if I have to be honest, when I was reading the paper, I thought that the linearity was really essential for the result. After the talk, I am actually now convinced of the opposite, which is that in a way, that you get substitutability and not because of linearity, but despite of linearity. In a way, linearity does not invite substitutability. I have this sort of intuition. And the reason that, and if that's true, I think that's an interesting point, because the substitutability in the model is really coming, it's really informational. It's not coming from this context function. But that's something I think it would be nice to have a like kind of a sharp answer for. And then the second point, so the importance of understanding really where substitutability is coming from. The second point is like, let's take substitutability for granted. I think it's important to explain why it matters. You say, you know, that leads to differentiation. Unfortunately, you know, you didn't have a lot of time at the end, but I think that that's really where the meat of the paper is. I think it's important to ask, then what? Can we link the increase in differentiation or the increase in polarization to welfare in the model, not just in the world? Because, you know, things are a little bit tricky. Like, for example, in my model, differentiation, in my paper with sub-UXL, differentiation was actually leading each voter to be strictly better off individually, and then, you know, the inefficiency was coming about because these voters were participating in a voting game, and the outcome of this voting game was more noisy. But it's not obvious to me that differentiation necessarily lead to a decrease in welfare. I don't know if the paper makes this point. If it doesn't, it would be interesting to have some discussion about why, what are the direct implications of an increased of substitutability that lead to an increase in differentiation. But overall, you know, really nice work, and congratulations for the paper.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your comments. They're very correlated with the referees, so I don't know how to take that. But I will take it as really things that we need to clarify, and to be honest, we have been working hard to clarify this. So let me very quickly touch upon the point about strategic substitutability. So the conditions that we provide are sufficient for strategic substitutability, and the conditions go beyond the linear case. So in a sense, we're kind of, you know, guaranteeing substitutability by looking at a very restricted set of options, of conditions. We have characterized situations with complementarity, but they are like, you know, very tight. I mean, very limited. So and probably we should, you know, offer that provide that information by saying, listen, we could have a strategic complementarity, but we need all these conditions that may actually be so for instance, we need that the effect on the credibility of the news of the other guy. So if the right captures the feed, the effect on the credibility on the lies of the left is larger than on the right, which seems a little weird, right? So somehow, so basically, well, that's one condition. So we do have conditions for strategic complementarity, but they are like very limited. But thank you for emphasizing that. We don't have welfare, and like your very nice observation in your paper that individually they're better off, collectively because of this voting game they're worse off. Here there is a sense, as you know, in the Wing's papers also have this, I guess, feature that you know you're increasing capture. So if I am right-leaning, the right interest group may be capturing more that information source. But since I care about the other type of messages, I may not be hurt by that, or I may not be that much hurt by that. So it's not clear that we can have strong welfare predictions. Even in the case of a monopoly information source. So in the monopoly information source, because of a strategic substitutability, if I go from an incumbent interest group to 2 interest groups, the incumbent interest group is going to reduce capture, no question. But can I say something about the welfare? Well, no, not really, because I cannot rank the resulting information in a Blackwell sense, and that's the problem, right? Because the incumbent is going to reduce, the left is going to increase, and now I'm going to have these 2 lambdas moving in sync, and that leads to a non-Blackwell order information source. But Jacopo, I know you have to leave. Thank you so much for these comments.
Thank you, Ricardo. This was a great talk. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. Let's maybe stop the official part and the recording. But yeah, Ricardo, if you have time for